In the late 1990s, Hollywood had found a new kind of hero. When Keanu Reeves stepped into the role of Neo in The Matrix, he didn't just star in a sci-fi film. He became the face of a cultural revolution. Black trench coat, slow-motion bullets, a quiet man questioning reality itself. The film exploded worldwide, redefining action cinema and philosophy for a new generation. Keanu wasn't loud or flashy. He wasn't chasing headlines. He stood still while the world moved around him, and somehow, that stillness made him magnetic. In that moment, he wasn't just a movie star. He was the future of action films. At the same time, another talent was carving his own path to greatness. Robert Downey Jr. had already proven he wasn't just another Hollywood name. With a natural charisma and razor-sharp wit, he delivered performances that critics couldn't ignore. His portrayal of Charlie Chaplin in Chaplin earned him an Academy Award nomination, placing him among the industry's elite at a young age. Directors saw brilliance in him. Audiences saw unpredictability. He wasn't a silent warrior like Keanu. He was electric, expressive, almost untouchable in his talent. Hollywood believed he would become one of the greatest actors of his generation. By the early 2000s, both men stood at extraordinary heights, but in completely different ways. Keanu had global blockbuster power. His name alone could sell tickets. He represented calm intensity, discipline, and mystery. Robert Downey Jr., on the other hand, embodied artistic genius. He was the kind of actor who could steal a scene with a single look or a perfectly timed line. One ruled through presence. The other ruled through personality. Together, they represented two very different definitions of success. The industry buzzed with expectation. For Keanu, the question wasn't whether he was a star, it was how much bigger he would become. For Downey, it wasn't about fame, it was about legacy. Both had everything: money, recognition, admiration. They had climbed the mountain, planted their flags, and looked down at a world cheering their names. Few could imagine that their greatest battles weren't ahead of them on screen, but waiting quietly behind the curtain. Because in Hollywood, success is fragile. Fame can vanish overnight. And sometimes, the higher you rise, the harder the fall becomes. Success in Hollywood can feel permanent until it suddenly isn't. For Robert Downey Jr., the fall was not quiet. It was public, chaotic, and impossible to ignore. What had once been praised as eccentric brilliance began to spiral into something darker. Addiction tightened its grip, and the headlines shifted from red carpets to arrests. Courtrooms replaced film premieres. Studios began to hesitate. Insurance companies refused to back him. The same industry that once celebrated his genius now saw him as a liability. In the early 2000s, it wasn't just his career at risk, it was his life. Hollywood can forgive failure, but it rarely forgives unpredictability. Downey's struggles led to jail time and forced rehabilitation. Directors who once admired his talent stepped back. Casting agents stopped calling. Whispers began circulating through the industry. He's finished. For an actor once nominated for an Oscar, the silence was deafening. The fall wasn't gradual, it was a collapse. He had fallen from the top of the mountain into a valley so deep that few believed he could ever climb out again. Meanwhile, Keanu Reeves faced a very different kind of decline. There were no mugshots, no courtroom drama, no explosive scandals. Instead, his fall came quietly. After the massive success of the Matrix era, the momentum slowed. A string of underperforming films began to chip away at his box office dominance. Critics questioned his range. Online forums mocked his performances. Hollywood, always hungry for the next new face, started to look past him. He wasn't collapsing in flames. He was fading into the background. For Keanu, the struggle was more subtle but equally dangerous. In an industry driven by relevance, silence can be just as threatening as scandal. The spotlight dimmed. Leading roles became fewer. The once revolutionary action icon was now viewed as yesterday's star. The narrative shifted from future legend to has-been. And in Hollywood, being labeled irrelevant can quietly end a career. Two men, two different falls. One shattered publicly under the weight of addiction and controversy. The other slowly drifted away from the center of attention. But whether loud or silent, both were standing at the same place, rock bottom. And from there was only one question left. Could they rise again? Rock bottom doesn't come with a warning, but sometimes it comes with a choice. For Robert Downey Jr., that choice arrived in the form of a gamble that many believed was reckless. When a relatively untested studio cast him as Tony Stark in Iron Man, it wasn't seen as a safe decision. It was seen as a risk. Studios were nervous. Insurers were skeptical. Investors questioned whether audiences would accept him as the face of a major superhero franchise. If the film failed, it wouldn't just damage the studio. It would confirm what critics had already decided, that Downey's time was over. But something about Tony Stark felt personal. A genius. A man battling his own demons. Arrogant, broken, but capable of change. Downey wasn't just playing a character. He was channeling his own history into the performance. Every sarcastic line, every vulnerable moment behind the armor carried the weight of lived experience. The risk wasn't just professional. It was emotional. If audiences rejected him, there would be nowhere left to go. This wasn't a comeback yet, it was a last chance. Meanwhile, Keanu Reeves was preparing for a different kind of resurrection. The script for John Wick wasn't built on a massive comic book brand or an existing cinematic universe. It was a gritty, stripped-down revenge story about a retired assassin mourning the loss of his wife and his dog. The premise sounded small. Some doubted whether audiences would care. But Keanu saw something others didn't. Simplicity, discipline, and intensity. He committed fully. Months of martial arts training, firearms drills, tactical choreography. He wasn't chasing spectacle, he was building precision. Both projects carried enormous uncertainty. Iron Man was the foundation of a risky shared universe idea that had never been tested at that scale. John Wick was directed by stunt professionals stepping into filmmaking for the first time. Neither film had guaranteed success. Neither actor had room for failure. For Downey, this was redemption or ruin. For Keanu, it was relevance or disappearance. And so, in two different studios, under two very different circumstances, both men stood at the edge of everything. The cameras rolled, the pressure mounted, and somewhere in that tension was the possibility of resurrection. But in Hollywood, possibility means nothing until the audience decides. When Iron Man hit theaters, something unexpected happened. It didn't just succeed, it ignited. Audiences didn't see Robert Downey Jr. as a risk anymore. They saw him as Tony Stark. Sharp, flawed, brilliant, human. The performance felt so natural that it blurred the line between actor and character. What was meant to be a standalone superhero film became the foundation of something much bigger. The gamble had paid off, not quietly but explosively. As the years passed, Downey's portrayal evolved into the beating heart of an entire cinematic empire. The rise of the Marvel Cinematic Universe transformed him into one of the highest-paid actors in Hollywood. And when Avengers Endgame arrived, it wasn't just a movie, it was a global event. His final scene as Iron Man became one of the most emotional moments in blockbuster history. The same man once deemed uninsurable now stood at the center of the highest-grossing films of all time. This wasn't just a comeback, it was domination. Meanwhile, in 2014, John Wick entered theaters with far less noise, but just as much impact. Keanu Reeves didn't deliver flashy speeches or comedic one-liners. He delivered silence, control, and raw intensity. The action choreography felt different, precise, brutal, grounded. Audiences noticed. Critics praised the film's discipline. Word spread quickly. This wasn't just another action movie. It was the beginning of a new standard. With each sequel, the legend grew. The John Wick franchise redefined modern action cinema, inspiring a wave of gun fu, choreography, and realistic combat training across Hollywood. Keanu's dedication became part of the story. His real-life training sessions, his humility on set, his quiet professionalism. Unlike Downey's loud, triumphant redemption, Keanu's resurrection felt calm and earned. No scandal erased, no controversy overshadowed, just steady persistence proving itself over time. Two different resurrections, one powered by a global superhero phenomenon, the other built on discipline and reinvention. Downey rose like a phoenix in flames, reclaiming his throne at the center of Hollywood. Keanu returned like a shadow stepping back into the light, reshaping the genre without demanding attention. Both had fallen, both had risked everything, and now, both were undeniable once again. Now comes the hardest question, not who made more money, not who sold more tickets, but who truly earned the crown of Hollywood's greatest comeback. When we look at Robert Downey Jr., the scale of his fall is impossible to ignore. Addiction, arrests, jail time, industry rejection. His collapse was public and devastating. The climb back wasn't just professional, it was deeply personal. To go from being labeled uninsurable to becoming the face of the Marvel Cinematic Universe is the kind of arc Hollywood scripts are built around. His comeback wasn't subtle, it was seismic. Then there is Keanu Reeves, a man whose fall was quieter, but whose endurance was just as powerful. He didn't battle headlines filled with scandal. He battled irrelevance. In an industry obsessed with youth and hype, fading away can be just as final as being blacklisted. Yet instead of chasing trends, he sharpened his craft. Instead of demanding attention, he rebuilt his presence through discipline. His rise through the John Wick franchise didn't just revive his career, it redefined him. He transformed from a 90s action icon into a modern legend admired across generations. The difference between them lies in the nature of their resurrection. Downey's comeback feels like redemption, a dramatic story of a man confronting his demons and winning. Keanu's feels like resilience, a story of patience, humility, and quiet reinvention. One conquered chaos, the other conquered time. One returned in a blaze of global box office dominance. The other returned with precision, consistency, and cultural respect. Both journeys inspire, but in completely different ways. So, who is the true comeback king of Hollywood? Is it the man who rose from scandal to lead billion-dollar blockbusters? Or the man who refused to fade away and rebuilt himself without noise? The crown may depend on what you value more, redemption or resilience, spectacle or steadiness. But perhaps the real answer is this: Hollywood rarely gives second chances. And yet, somehow, both of these men didn't just get one. They made history with it.